All right, everyone, it's time to talk about the ugly racism of Kamalaharris and some ugly racism on Twitter that I encountered, levied against, I guess, white people, supposedly European, even though, again, until a few months ago, I'd never set foot in Europe. I'm not in England at the moment. Here's a funny thing. Look, link in the description. Kamala Harris made her Indigenous people spiel in relation to the environment. And if I had to choose a video that exemplified the concept of the noble savage mythology, it would definitely be this. For those of you who aren't aware, like you didn't take, history on this or something, the noble savage mythology was an idea concocted by the colonials when they were encountering some of the various Mesoamerican groups, African tribes, Asian groups, various people around the world that they hadn't encountered before. And they were trying to, through anthropology in a crude way, categorize, the ethnic systems, look at the languages, the history, the mythology, especially because they were convinced in their own supremacy. And so they concocted the idea that there were certain groups of people, especially in the Old West sort of Native American sense, Native American in quotations always, because there's no such thing. Bering Land Bridge is a thing. Solutrean hypothesis, still not technically disproven, by the way. The idea was that certain groups were, before Westerners approached, they were noble. That is, that they were savage, according to their standards, or barbarians. They were uncouth and didn't have, they didn't have the wheel or something. They didn't have some of the modern technology that Europeans and white Americans and so forth were using, but they were noble in nature. They had a noble spirit. They were very religious. They were very, very stoic. They lived off the land, and they were brave, muscular men hunting, and they respected their kills, and they ran through the woods naked, and they were chaste, and even though they weren't Christians, they were going to hell, their religion was okay, and they had a million weird things that they would concoct. This, by the way, this sort of romanticization you see later as well with the spaghetti western sort of period. If you look at American cinema history, 60s and 70s, like a Gunsmoke or something, how are the Native Americans, other than the Comanches, typically portrayed? Even those that are fighting, there's a nobility, there's a special bravery, and literally called braves. They're very brave, they're very stoic, very resourceful, and even if you get killed by them, you still sort of respect them because, they're one with the Great Spirit. This is a mythology. This is not reality in any historical way. The tribes that were here before European contact butchered each other constantly, misused land resources, and the idea that they wandered around in connection with nature and that they prayed to acorns and stuff and were in touch with the Great Spirit, that's bullshit. It's a romanticization of a thing that was never actually real. No, human sacrifice and infanticide and constant war were the hallmarks of those groups of people well into the pre-modern period. Kamala Harris, by making this spiel and saying Indigenous people have always protected the earth. No, they didn't. What are you talking about? How did they protect? What do you mean? How is it any different? Okay, you're like hunter-gatherer. You're hunting animals. You're gathering wood and so forth, chopping down trees, making your house and stuff. How are you not expropriating resources from nature for your own anthropic purposes? It's exactly the same. The only difference is they weren't doing it on an industrial scale because they lacked the technology. Noble savage mythology aside, come on. So antiquated. She sounds like a professor from the late 19th century. I've encountered stuff like this, tropes like this, in some of the occult manuscripts that I've been editing. Then I got into it with some Twitter users. So that's the Kamala Harris side of it. So she's total bigot. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She didn't study history. She was too busy smoking weed and listening to Tupac before he existed as a thing. Then there were some Twitter users. And I responded to the Kamala Harris post and I said, well, I'm Indigenous too. I was born in North America. My family's been here since at least the mid-1600s. I can't be Indigenous to anywhere else, so, stop pandering. Somebody got really butthurt over that, a social justice warrior, with anti-bigot in their tagline, by the way, which is not a surprise whatsoever to me, in any way, shape, or form. Said, you're not Indigenous, shut up. And I pointed out, okay, where am I Indigenous to? Europe? So they're Indigenous Europeans. Oh, now you sound like Varg Vikernes all of a sudden. You sound like a white supremacist. And of course it was, a middle-aged white woman using the softener thing, like on Snapchat and some of these services. There are filters you can use to make your face look softer. There's a reason why people usually use them. And it's like, okay, well, now you sound like you're arguing for white ethno-states or something. How interesting. But no matter how much I pushed her to say where I was indigenous to under the circumstances of my birth, she wouldn't admit to that. There's a reason why, because it would sound racist. Well, yeah, when you're saying that people should have a special seat at the table because of the color of their skin or their ethnic background, Elizabeth Warren aside, as you know, the Native American she is, and she is because she was born in this continent, that aside, that's an asinine idea. The idea that a person should have a special place in the civic society, the modern secular civic framework of the United States, based on the fact that some ancestor they had 6 generations ago was actually a Cherokee or something, is asinine. Most of the people who claim tribal membership in the United States are at most a quarter, quote-unquote, Native American anyway. They're mostly Europeans, so are they indigenous Europeans? Then these same people that ramble loud and long about the importance of doing these things will call you a racist if you suggest the very existence of indigenous Europeans. I find it funny. How is it that there is this one part of the world that's not allowed to have indigenous tribal memberships? Everywhere else has them. Every other friggin' culture in the world. Here, it's just that, like, you're not indigenous. I'm not indigenous to North America. Okay, I was born here. I don't speak with a British accent. Half of my ancestry comes from England, but I don't speak with I don't sound like I don't sound like Sharon Osbourne. I'm born here. My parents are born here. My grandparents are born here. Their parents are born here. You can go back to the middle of the 1600s and you'll find the origins of my direct lineage in this continent. It predates the United States by a century. If I'm not indigenous to North America at this point, having genetically diverged from Europe that many hundreds of years ago, where can I possibly be indigenous to? Because I wouldn't feel at home. If you dropped me in England, I wouldn't feel at home. I don't speak the lingo. I don't use the same terminologies. The languages has diverged for hundreds of years as well. I don't eat the food and stuff. I mean, I'm sure I would love visiting it. It'd be interesting, especially to see like Warwick Castle and stuff. But, you know, it's not my homeland. I've never been there. I wasn't born there. Don't speak the language. Again, I'm not part of the civic structure. I couldn't deal with the legalistic framework of the UK. I'd probably get thrown in jail for wrong think anyway. Where else can I be indigenous to if it is not North America? I asked this over and over in several different ways and got no response. There's a reason for that. And so I sat there and said, oh, haha, Kamala Harris's fans are racist too. Whoa, who'd have thunk it? Could it be that when you pander on these issues nonstop, like the only platform she's managed to concoct is wedge issues? She's the identity politics candidate. Thank goodness she's in a distant 5th place and falling right now. At some point she'll be below Tulsi Gabbard, who I guarantee will stick it in the race just long enough to be ahead of her in the aggregate, just to declare that fact on Twitter and chuckle about it. By the way, good on her. I think it's great that Tulsi Gabbard took her down a peg. And that enrages Kamala fans. When you confront them with that, oh, they get so mad. Hey, Tulsi Gabbard will be at the next debate. They grit their teeth and they go crazy. She has the most cult-like fans of any person in the Dem field. Definitely. Bar none. But Bernie bros have nothing on Kamala Harris fans. You think the Elizabeth Warren pinheads who think she's actually a progressive have anything on Kamala Harris? At this point, all she's got is her most hardened, ardent fans left anyway. Everyone else left her for other candidates long ago. These people are legit nasty. Especially Twitter's a far left playground anyway, so if you're talking to people on Twitter, the Overton window's a little bit different than polite culture. Bill Maher now satirizes Twitter, actually, on this token. What a racist. It's funny because people, you know, Kamala Harris is probably not used to being called that, but she is, and she's explicitly listing these people are special due to ethnicity. By the way, you're not because of your ethnicity. You're not indigenous to anywhere, so I can't, other than die, what can I do to appease these people? Yeah, and then one day for no reason, you know, if you get the reference. That's about all. Peace out.